Good evening and thank you for watching NTV. My name is Ben Winnie. Today, the 22nd of March 2015 is World Water Day. This is a day that's celebrated worldwide to recognize the importance of fresh water in sustainable development. As you've heard, water is life. Indeed it is. We've been having some shortages of water in this country, especially in the city, so you know how big a deal this is. Joining me to talk about this and the theme for this year are two very special people. First is Dr. Callist Tindemugaya. He's a Commissioner for Water Resources, Planning and Regulation at the Ministry of Water and Environment. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Ben.
We're also joined by Mr. Frank Twinamasko, who is Advocacy and Policy Analyst at the Uganda Water and Sanitation NGO Network, or UWASNet.
Thank you, Ben.
Welcome to the show. We'll refer to your organization as UWASNet.
Yes,
just
for now.
Yeah,
and the next time.
To keep it very simple. Yes. Dr. Callis, for being here, first of all, do we assume that by the virtue of your title, Water Resources, Planning and Regulation, you're responsible for bringing typhoid or taking it away? Everyone has been talking about typhoid over the last few weeks.
Thank you very much, Ben. First of all, I work for the Ministry of Water and Environment, and of course, when you talk about typhoid, then the Ministry of Water and Environment is part and parcel of the team of government agencies that are responsible for addressing this challenge. Indeed, we have been working with the other partners, Ministry of Health, KCCA, National Water and Sewage Corporation, and others to address this problem. But we are not the ones bringing it.
You're not the ones bringing it.
We are actually part of the team that is trying to control it.
Well, we're just looking for someone to shoot, so whenever we hear anyone who works anything to do with water, we take the opportunity. Frank, UWASNet, what does UWASNet do?
Thank you, Ben. The Uganda Water and Sanitation NGO Network, or UWASNet, is a national network for all civil society organizations that are putting their efforts into providing safe water, sanitation, and then providing safe hygiene services. We've got about 230 membership countrywide, and our work rotates around coordinating efforts of our members with government so that we disseminate government policies to our members. We also build our capacity of our members in a number of areas. There are those who provide water, so we give them technical inputs, but also in areas of policy advocacy, networking, and then we also advocate for the right to water as a human right. So we link up with government to ensure that the government provides services that are mandated, especially in the areas of water, sanitation and hygiene.
Okay. And Dr. Callis, your department, what do you do? What does your department do regarding to water and regulation and planning?
Okay, thank you very much. First of all, as I mentioned, I work for the Ministry of Water and Environment, and the Ministry of Water and Environment is responsible for sustainable development and management of water and environment resources. And of course, we are structured along 3 directorates. We have a Directorate of Environment Affairs, basically looking at the environment resources. We have a Directorate of Water Development, looking at developing water resources for different uses. Then we have the Directorate of Water Resources Management, basically responsible for all the water resources of Uganda. So I work for the Directorate of Water Resources Management, and we are responsible for ensuring that all the different uses of water actually provided for. We are responsible for controlling the quality of water resources. We control pollution, but also ensure that water resources are optimally used to meet the demands of the present and future generations.
One of the problems we have in Africa is that we're not very good at counting our blessings. I like to say that we depend entirely on God's grace, because if the way we treat our country and the things that God has given us, if we didn't handle them well, would probably all be dead. And water is one of the big issues. I believe that, and I'm looking for some clarification from you,
right.
Uganda has one of the best blessings in terms of access to fresh water.
Right.
I'm right in saying that answer.
Right.
In
Yes.
terms of how much water we actually have compared to the rest of the world, what are some of the statistics that you can throw out for our viewers to just understand how blessed we are as a country in regards to water?
Thank you very much, Ben. I must say that we have a lot of water in Uganda.
Fresh water.
Fresh water resources. Actually, most of our water resources are fresh. We have in Uganda about 43 billion cubic meters of water annually, and this water is renewed, is being replenished. But 69% of that water actually comes from outside our borders. We are talking of 29 billion cubic meters of water coming from outside Uganda's borders, and the water that is generated internally is only 14 billion cubic meters of water. So if Uganda's neighbors were to cross the borders, Uganda would only be remaining with just 31% of the water that we have.
And how much of it do we use?
How much of the, actually we are using very little of this water. We have done a national water resources assessment where we have quantified this water, as I have mentioned, but we have found that actually we are only using about 1.5% of that water. So we still have a lot of water that we can use. But in the year 2040, we project that we shall be using about 15% of this water. So we still have a lot of water, but the challenge is it comes at the wrong time. Sometimes it comes when it is too much, causing floods. You hear people complaining. Then during the dry period, it is too little, and you hear people complaining of drought. So the challenge we have as a country is to managing that variability. We have too much water, we have a lot of water, but sometimes comes at the wrong time.
And also, of course, Frank, depends on where the water is and where it's not. Like you say, sometimes it comes a lot, so you'll find some places complaining of floods, while at the same time, other places are complaining of drought.
Yes, definitely. We have places that are prone to floods, but also we have places that are water stressed. So part of what we do as we worsen it is to ensure that the government of Uganda ensures that water is distributed equitably as a human right. So government has set standards for access. That if you live in a countryside or in a rural area, you are not supposed to move more than a kilometer to access a water point. The same for you who lives in urban area, and you have to access to a public water point. You're not supposed to move for more than 200 meters. So part of what we do as USNet, our members partly contribute to that by putting water facilities. In addition, we still go back to Kalista and his team to ensure that they also provide waters to that standard. And then definitely there are still a bit of issues around that one. For example, as of June 2014, people who live in urban areas and they were accessing clean, safe water services were at 72.8%. And those who live in urban villages or rural areas we are at 64%. So even with that one, even when we still have a lot, there are still issues around access.
So we have a lot of water,
yes,
but not everyone can be able to get to it, because to have 36% of your rural population not being able to access water is actually a big problem.
And clean and safe water. They do access some bit of water. Yeah. But to be clarified as clean and safe.
Clean and safe.
Yes.
When you talk about clean and safe, are we saying we define clean and safe as piped water, or water that is coming through national water? What do we define as clean and safe water in this particular case?
Maybe just come in, Ben. First of all, we have a lot of water, but this water actually has to be cleaned to make it usable. Otherwise, you can go to Lake Victoria, you consume the water and you die. That's why you have been seeing typhoid. People are going to the springs, to the wells and getting the water, and they are dying. So the water has actually to be treated to make it meet the standards. We have standards that we have developed. So any water that has to be consumed by individuals has to meet those standards.
There has always been the perception that if I grew up in the village, that when you get water from a spring, it's actually very clean and purified, which was the case for a very long time.
Right.
But that has changed now because of the way we are polluting the water sources.
Yes.
And people are not very aware of this, and so you end up having issues. Someone was telling us last week that the issue with typhoid has been because people set up buildings in Kampala, and instead of using clean, safe piped water, are digging into the ground and taking water from the springs, which they think to be safe, and putting it through their building systems, and it turns out it's water that's actually killing people.
Indeed, that's the problem. Previously, the water was good and you could consume it without even boiling. Yeah. Just because we had not tampered with the water. But right now you find that you have a spring, just next to it there is a pit latrine. Those days the population was still small, and also the environment was much better protected. But right now You find houses everywhere, petrons everywhere, septic tanks everywhere, waste disposal sites everywhere. So our water resource is actually under pressure. So as I was saying, we have a lot of water, but it's under pressure from pollution. It's under pressure from, of course, climate change, environmental degradation, and so forth. So that's why we're having cases like typhoid, cholera, dysentery, again because of the problem of not managing this water well.
You were saying something.
I think I was just in support that, you know, because we've grown so much, you know, in Uganda the population growth is highest in sub-Saharan Africa and the second in the world after Niger. So
and it's projected to increase at an even faster pace than we are at the moment.
Put a lot of strain on the existing sources and systems, and because of that, now is too much water. That is talked about, we strained the system and polluted it, and that's where we're having some of the problems I'm saying.
Yeah, and then of course in regards to regulation, in terms of the issues that come out, I'll give you a good example. Someone sent me a photo last week of a Chinese factory somewhere in Jinja that has been releasing fecal matter, fecal waste, directly into a river. And if you see the photo, it's actually disgusting. You basically have human feces that have contaminated an entire river. How do we get to control things like that? Because they're making things a lot worse. Who is supposed to follow them up? Do they have godfathers protecting them? Because if you go, they say, I'm an investor, I have someone watching over me. How do we do that? Because if they keep on doing this, then our water actually becomes even more contaminated.
Yes, actually, you're right. And I think that's an issue really I would want us all Ugandans to look at it and take seriously. As the Ministry of Water and Environment, also in collaboration with the National Environment Management Authority, we are responsible for controlling pollution. The department which I head issues permits for those who are discharging waste into water bodies. And the aim is to control pollution, as you are talking about. So we issue wastewater discharge permits, and the permits will say you cannot discharge waste that doesn't meet these standards. But what is happening? Some of these investors, some of these companies are discharging at night. That's why government has set up environment police. Yes. But of course, you know, you cannot be everywhere.
A criminal is always going to find a way of beating the system.
So what are we doing? We are actually, we have created a wastewater discharge dialogue, in particular for Kampala. We want the private companies, first of all, to understand that they are not doing us a favor by not complying, or they are not hurting us.
Many of them don't seem to know that. They seem to think they are our bosses.
Yes, and that's the issue. So right now we are trying to get them to understand that you are discharging waste in the water body where you are getting already the water. We have decided as government that we are going to be allowing them to discharge upstream the point where they are drawing the water so that they feel the pinch. But we feel enforcement of the law requires those actually who are doing those activities to understand and appreciate. The moment you just want to catch them the way the police will catch you, you cannot manage because you cannot be everywhere. So we are trying to create public-private partnerships so that we can help them. We have what you call compliance assistance, assist them. Some of them may not have knowledge of treatment technologies. We want them to learn from each other, but we also want to see how government can help them. But most importantly, to get them to understand that if they continue, the resource will be under pressure, and their establishments will also suffer.
And of course, are there penalties if you're found to be in contravention of the standards that have been set?
Yes, we do. When you don't comply with the conditions, there are penalties. The starting point we do is, first of all, we warn you. We don't straight away take cash penalties. We warn you, bring to your attention what you are doing, and we give you a time frame within which to comply. If you don't, we have a provision to take you to court, but also to fine. Because every discharge we have a fee that you are supposed to pay if you are not meeting the standard.
I hope it's punitive enough to discourage them from...
Right now we are reviewing it to make it actually harsher. We feel that what we have been charging probably hasn't been as punitive.
They feel it's cheaper for them to pay the fine.
So right now we are revising it to make sure that really the cost of treatment is lower than the fine that you have.
Frank, as OSNet, civil society and the role in being able to help with this, the commissioner here says that, look, as you can imagine, the government can't be able to police all of these places at the same time. Where does civil society come in here? Because you're the ones who work a lot on the ground with the communities, with the people. How do you help them to be able to enforce these things? Because when these companies are polluting their environment, it's them that suffer the most.
Part of what our members do is creating awareness. But particularly for urban areas and the Kampala, we've joined Kampala KCCA in having Kampala Water and Sanitation Forum. Now, we use this forum as spaces for bringing out many of these issues. And this forum has membership including private sector. So we are using these spaces. But also in addition, we do a lot of research around issues of waste management. And then we discuss and amplify them, but also part of our advocacy efforts, because these discharges affect our membership and accessing clean and safe water.
Exactly.
So we are doing a lot of advocacy around that, and we've joined forces with government, private sector, and then media. Most of our work we have media as part of that. But also we've at policy making level, we've supported the creation of a forum at Parliament called Uganda Parliamentary Water and Sanitation Forum. Now, at that level, it's pushing the Parliament, in addition to what they are talking about, the laws, to ensure that now good laws are formulated and implemented to ensure that at least waste disposal is managed. Yeah.
That becomes a big problem. Well, we're going to take a very quick break. When we come back, we get into this year's theme. We're talking about water and sustainable development. How do the two connect? How do the two relate? And then, of course, we'll talk about the celebration of World Water Day, which is going to be tomorrow. We'll talk about that, and of course, take your phone calls as well in case you want to get in touch and share your thoughts or ask any questions on the show here. We'll be right back.
After a dry night in Pampers, babies can achieve so many things. Introducing new and improved Pampers for a dry and comfortable night's sleep, thanks to our new stretchy side and with super gel that absorbs and locks in wetness better than other diapers, so your baby starts the day dry, making every morning one to be proud of. New Baby Dry Pampers, wishing you love, sleep and play.
Airtel Trace Music Store has received hundreds of thousands of phone calls and narrowed them down to 13 local champions from across Africa. Now it's up to you to support your favorite by voting, either by calling in or by texting your favorite contestant's keyword to the correct number for the country you live in. From Uganda, Sandra Subi.
The next episode brought to you by...
There is new Omo Fast Action.
Deception.
Jackie, unainida kukaaba munagati abasawo bo bagamba ki?
What is that, Mom? Is that he needs surgery? I don't have the money to take him there.
If you think I'm a nightmare, what about your husband?
Then if it is Gilbert, I think we should go and arrest him and bring him for questioning.
No one is arresting my husband. I hear each and everything, even when you're at work.
Are you sure? How good was my day?
Deception.
Children's amazing ideas can lead to tough stains. There's new Omo Fast Action. New Omo. No one removes stains faster.
Welcome back and thank you for watching NTV. My name is Ben Wine. We're joined here by Dr. Calist Tindemugaya, who is the Commissioner of Water Resources, Planning and Regulation at the Ministry of Water and Environment. Also joined by Mr. Frank Twenamasiko, who is Advocacy and Policy Officer at UWASNET, the Uganda Water and Sanitation NGO Network. I hope I got that right.
Yes,
so quite a long name. If you have to join us on the discussion, we're talking about World Water Day, which is actually today, but the official celebration is going to be tomorrow in Entebbe at the Directorate of Water Resource Management. That's going to be tomorrow in Entebbe, but for today we're talking about water and sustainable development, which is the theme for this year's World Water Day. If you want to join us, of course, phone lines are on your screen. You can give us a call if you have any question or contribution regarding our discussion for this afternoon. Dr. Calist, before we went to the break, we were talking about the way water resources are being managed and pollution and all of those things, and how much fresh water we have in Uganda. Let's shift our discussion towards our theme for this year. We're talking about water and sustainable development. How do the two come together?
Thank you very much, Ben. First of all, I would want our viewers to recognize that water touches every sector, every aspect of our lives.
Water is life. I think that sums it up, doesn't it?
Sums it up. There is nothing you can do without water being involved. Either it will be a primary input or it will be a facilitating input. So,
do you think people underestimate just how important water is for them? I mean, like I mentioned at the beginning of the show, in the last few weeks, there's been an acute water shortage in some parts of Kampala in particular. And the madness and the level of abuse that went out towards the government and the national water, and you could tell that people's frustration wasn't even directed at the individual bodies, but just the fact that they had no access to the water.
Yes, I agree with you. Sometimes, you know, when you have something, you don't understand how important it is.
Yeah, or when it's too much that you take it for granted.
You take it for granted.
Like oxygen.
Yeah. So, water has generally been available, and people tend to think that it will always be there. But when it is not available, that's when you feel how important it is. They say you can stay for weeks without actually food, but you can only stay just for a few days without water. That's how important it is. Of course, you can relate water to air. Of course, air may be more important than water, but if you are to look at prioritization, then probably water will come next year. Without water, you cannot live.
Not for long anyway.
You cannot live for long. So we are trying to get the country and everybody to understand that water is at the center of our development aspirations, whether socio-economic development, whether socio-economic or economically, any activity you are thinking about, whether you want to set up an industry, and in any industry, we need water. For example, beer is 95% of water. Those people who like beer, if water is not available, then you will have no beer to drink. Soda is 98% water. So you can just look at that. If you talk about an industry, there is no industry that doesn't use water, either as a primary input or as the facilitating input. Agriculture, you are talking about agriculture. When you hear crops drying up, it's because there is no water. Energy. We are talking about hydropower.
We depend on water for our power.
We depend on water for our power. We depend on water, of course, for drinking. We are talking about navigation. Fisheries. You have never seen fish living on land. Fish will live in the water. So, building industry in Kampala, for example, if there is no water to make bricks or to mix sand and cement, all of this industry would suffer. So, in a way, we are trying to get people to understand that water is at the heart of everything we do. If we want to talk about development, water has to be there. If water is not available, then you cannot talk about sustainable development.
Frank, your organization works a lot with communities. Do people understand what Dr. Calist is trying to bring out, just in terms of how important water is and its relation to development?
Thank you, Ben. Like he said, for a long time, people have taken it for granted because it has always been there.
It's just there, so you don't think about it.
You don't think about it, including knowing that your body is made up of close to 70% of water, that if you didn't have it, you would not live. But also, he's spoken at a higher level, even at micro level, at home. Even those who are doing small-scale business, if you are selling maize by the roadside, possibly by the time you are boiling it home, you need water. So at community level, for a long time, people did not they understand very much about the role of water being the center of what they're doing. But like with the increasing changes, climate change, too much drought or too much water, people have realized that water is so important, and the consciousness is being developed both through our efforts, through the efforts of government, and people are now realizing how important water it is. Like I was saying, before you would go to the well and just draw water. Now people has to incur extra costs for boiling, for treatment,
purification, and all of those things.
And now they are realizing how important water is to their lives.
Do you think that we are moving well with the times? And our theme for this year is very critical: water and sustainable development. As part of the development that comes, you realize that it's very important to be able to move with the times. 20 years ago, you could go to the river, pick water out and drink it, and you are fine. Now you can't do that. But even more importantly, the way the world has been going, you have people who are into agriculture, for example, and that's something that I want us to dwell on for a few minutes. And you have countries where they don't have almost any water at all, and yet in terms of their production and productivity in agriculture, they are some of the highest in the world. They've managed to harness whatever little water they have and use it to maximum effect. For the longest time in Uganda, we have depended on God's blessed times and seasons. We know that in March we will have rain, it will come at this time, we will plant, and then we'll expect the harvest. That has changed. We're supposed to be in the rainy season now, and it hasn't started yet. And it completely tips the balance and makes things almost difficult to predict. How important is it for us now to be able to recognize that, and what do we need to do to then bring it into the point where we manage water? We have a lot of it, but it's coming at different times and places. How do we manage that to sustain our agriculture, for example, which is 80% of what we depend on as a country?
I think Dr. Karist, his part of his work is to make sure we have reserves.
But that do we actually have water reserves in this country?
I think,
apart from the ones in Lake Victoria, of course.
Yes, Ben, I think you are right. You are right. We have a lot of water, but the seasons are changing, so the water is no longer very. The case, as you have mentioned now, I don't know what is going to happen in the country. That the rains have delayed. People have been waiting for the rains to plant, but the rains haven't come.
No, I can tell you this, Doctor. I come from Kashari. I speak to my mother at least 3 or 4 times a week. And normally she's very jolly and happy and saying, you know how you talk to people in the village and they'll tell you, no, things are fine, it's raining, everything is all right. And I spoke to my mother and she said, we're in trouble. We don't have food. We're talking about a place that supplies Uganda with virtually all of its matoke, and they're saying, we don't have any food. The cows are struggling, we don't have milk. It becomes a problem.
Actually, the Minister of Water has already taken steps. Actually, a few years ago, we recognize that we cannot continue depending on rain-fed agriculture. We have invested heavily in construction of water reservoirs. Actually, a number of water reservoirs have been constructed. We have even gone further to procure equipment, where farmers are actually constructing some of these reservoirs on the farm. You go, for example, to Chiruhura. Many of the cattle farmers now are actually having equipment. The minister has bought a number of pieces of equipment, but when it goes to the district, no district wants to release it because they want to use it to the maximum. So the ministry is continuously adding on many machines, again, to improve water storage. We are still very, very far compared to other countries.
So where are these reservoirs at the moment?
The reservoirs, of course, and we have concentrated on the cattle corridor, the dry belts. They are in Rakai, Sembabule, Nakasongora, Tiruhura, Karamoja, but we are slowly moving the rest of the country, but we have been focusing on those traditional dry belts. But it's just a drop in the ocean.
But we actually do have some reservoirs.
Yes,
that's very encouraging.
Yeah, we do quite have a number of them. Actually, some very huge, which can be used for various purposes, fisheries, irrigation. Some of them we want the industries to draw water from there. We're also planning bulk water supply schemes to move water from where it is plenty to other areas. That's why you always hear about water for production.
That's an interesting one. We'll come back to that in a bit. Let's go to our phone lines for now. If you want to join us on the discussion, please do give us a call. Tell us where you're calling from, your name, and of course keep your deliberation to under 30 seconds so we can take as many phone calls as we can. Welcome to NTV. Thank you for watching the show.
Hello?
Yes, please.
My name is Daniel Royador.
Yes, Daniel.
I would like to ask my brother Frank and then Dr. Hart Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
What mechanism are put in place in safeguarding the shallow waters and then the springs that are down there in the villages? Because if you are to look at some of them, people just go and draw water, it is properly protected.
Okay, thank you very much, Daniel. Let's take another phone call. Welcome to the show. Thank you for watching NTV. NTV, hello? If you're calling us, please do turn down the TV volume so we can be able to hear you. Otherwise, it becomes a bit of a trick. Welcome to NTV. Thank you for watching the show. No, we dropped that phone call. Let's take another one. Welcome to NTV. Thank you for watching the show. Okay, we seem to have dropped that as well. Daniel, I was asking a very important question there. I grew up next to the River Rizi in Mbarara. I went to school there for 6 years in Mbarara High School. Last I heard, the river is actually running the high risk of actually drying up. So I'm told. And he's asking a question about how do we safeguard some of these shallow, and the Rizi wasn't even the shallowest really, there are a lot more than those. Okay. Does the ministry have anything in place to actually safeguard and protect some of these very shallow water sources and the springs, of course?
Okay, thank you very much, Ben. Yes, actually drying up of these sources or pollution of these sources is a very, very big issue. And the ministry, about actually 6 years ago, we started a program called Integrated Catchment-Based Water Resources Management. That we are trying to protect the catchments of these sources. Rizi is one of them, by the way. We are doing quite a lot of work in Rizi. We have managed to bring the stakeholders together under that framework, because we feel that if you don't bring people into whatever you are doing, then you will be wasting time. What is happening, for example, in Rizi? People have drained wetlands, people are digging along river banks, so we find the rivers are silted up, people are digging across the water sources upstream, agricultural practices are poor, so when it rains, all the water will come with the silt. Silt River Rizi. So Rizi has a lot of water in the rainy season, but in the dry season, very little water. So we are doing quite a lot of work. We have actually created what we call a catchment management committee for River Rizi. The chairperson is the LC5 chairperson for Isingiro, and we have about 22 members, and they are working with us. Even we are working with the Coca-Cola International, Coca-Cola, and the Nile Breweries, National Water, and we are trying to protect River Rizi. We feel the people should be at the heart of identifying the problem and solving them.
And speaking of people, Frank, that's where you come in, because you're working with the people. Civil society organizations, and in terms of educating people about the importance of being able to protect this, because it's not the ministry that's going to safeguard these resources. Ultimately, like you're saying, if it's the people who are reclaiming the wetlands and doing all of this, sometimes out of ignorance, it becomes your responsibility to make sure they know about these things.
Yes, thank you, Ben. And Daniel, how is Lila? I know he's from Lila. Thank you so much. I think part of what our members are doing in terms of the investment in ensuring that the water catchment is protected. We have last financial year 2013-14, our members invested around the 2 billion, which is about 2% of the total investment they did in water catchment. And we have members like JESE is Joint Effort to Save Environment, based in Kabarore. They are doing a lot of catchment around the River Mpanga and Protos. But we have a few other members across the country who are making efforts, first of all, to educate our members. We have another member called the International Institute of Road Construction, IRR, which they are doing a lot of work around protecting the catchment zones. But of course, like I said, the biggest challenge is that with increased population, people are encroaching what would be protection zones. And of course, like I was saying, only the regulation cannot protect, solve it. So we are increasingly educating our members, to educate their members also a question on how important this resource is and how important it is to be protected, for us to have sustainable water, because you will have it today, and the next other few years you will have nothing, and yet we need it.
Yeah, and when it goes, it will be a big problem.
And just to say then that the ministry has actually developed what we call water source protection guidelines. And these guidelines have been developed for point sources like shallow wells and springs. We have developed them for dams and valley tanks, even for hydropower schemes. And the ministry has said every person or every institution developing water has to put up 3% of his budget to protect these catchments. Yeah, moving forward, we feel catchments will be protected better because of those guidelines and the requirements.
Because right now we're doing very badly in protecting them, because we seem to think that it's not a problem until it becomes an issue, of course. Let's take a very quick break. When we come back, we'll take some of your phone calls. Please do call us if you have any questions or suggestions to add to our discussion. We're talking about World Water Day, which is going to be today actually, but the celebration is going to be tomorrow in Entebbe. We'll talk about that and how you can be involved, and of course how Dr. Calist and Frank expect you to be able to play your role in making sure that water and sustainable development go together. We'll be right back.
Introducing Night Zone from MTN. Talk for as long as you want for as little as 19 shillings per minute from midnight to 5 a.m. every night. Dial *135# to register.
Tonight on NTV with
OLX, everything sells.
It's a whole end-to-end process of helping the customer fulfill their needs.
Stalking me. Why are you following me? Answer me right now or I will mace you.
Jane, it's me, your imaginary friend from age 5 to 10.
Tonight on NTV.
Take a photo of the item you want to sell. Post it on OLX for free. Meet the buyer and tunda. OLX, everything sells.
And the change of government won't stop a thing. I've run out of fingers counting the number of multinationals setting up here. What about the 3 companies that announced their plans to launch last week? I say they're shopping. Me, I'd be looking to sell. At what price? More. Much, much more. I don't know who you are or how you know these things, but one thing I'm sure of, you're in the wrong job. Here, call me tomorrow at 9 o'clock in the morning. I'd like to hear more from you.
Are you ready for your big break? The East African, understanding the region.
Welcome back and thank you for watching NTV. We're talking about World Water Day, which is today, the 22nd of March 2015. Water is life. That's a given fact. I think we've talked about that enough. And you want to be a part of the discussion, please do join us as we talk about the celebrations for World Water Day, which are going to be tomorrow in Entebbe at the Directorate of Water Resource Management. And of course, the theme for this year is water and sustainable development. Dr. Calist is the commissioner in charge of all of these things, planning and water resource management and regulation. Let's take some phone calls and then we'll wrap up the show in terms of what you need to do and how you can get involved. When you do call us, please tell us where you're calling from, your name, and keep it short and sweet. Welcome to the show. Good evening. Fine, thank you. Who are we talking to? Yes, please. Okay.
I am not in the first few days that when the national.
Oh, sorry, we seem to have dropped that call. Please do call us back. We'd like to hear from you. NTV, welcome to the show. Good evening. Hello?
Hello.
Good evening. Welcome to the show.
Good evening to you. My name is Lillian.
Yes, Lillian.
We do appreciate
Thank you.
about the water discussion on television now. It's a good program. My concern is about waste management. We realize that the more we pollute and we don't manage our waste well, we are going to pollute the water. What is the strategy for government to handle our waste management?
Very good question, Lillian. Thank you very much. NTV, welcome to the show. Thank you for watching. Hello? Hello? We seem to have dropped that one. Okay, let's deal with Lillian's issue. You can't have water without waste management. The two pretty much go hand in hand. He says, look, you're doing all these lovely things. What are you doing about waste management?
Thank you very much, Ben, and thanks to Lillian for this question. First of all, waste management actually is a broad area. We are talking about solid waste, the things that we get out of our homes. Then we are also talking about wastewater management. So it's a big range. For example, we are talking about the fecal matter, discharging it into water bodies. So as Rian has mentioned, there is no way you can address issues of water pollution without dealing with waste management. As a ministry, we are handling mainly wastewater management, where we are licensing. One of the things, as I mentioned, is we are licensing whoever is discharging wastewater. We issue them permits and would want them to discharge the waste after they have treated it to meet the standards. But of course, the waste management is so broad, you may find that even at your home you are discharging waste that is not treated. So we would want to call upon every Ugandan to know that it's a problem and it's us to change our attitude.
It goes beyond just turning to the government. Let's take another phone call. Welcome to the show. Thank you for watching NTV. Hello?
Oh my God.
Good evening and welcome to NTV.
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you loud and clear. What's your name and where are you calling from?
Okay, my name is Rema. I'm calling from Kampala.
Yes, Rema.
I'm interested in knowing how government is working with CSOs to ensure that water resources are protected and sustainably used and managed sustainably.
Okay, Rema's question is, how are you working with the likes of Frank and Uwaznet in protecting all these resources that we are talking about?
Thank you very much, Ben. Actually, the whole purpose of being here with Frank is to demonstrate to the country that government and the CSOs are working together. Wetlands was, by the way, created, established through efforts of the Ministry of Water and Environment. We noted that the civil society working in water and sanitation needed to come together to coordinate their efforts and also supplement or assist government in the areas where government doesn't have a comparative advantage. So Wetlands was actually established and the initial stages supported by the Ministry of Water and Environment. And we value the work of the civil society. We always get the civil society to come in those areas, awareness raising, for example, advocacy, but also would want them to link us with the communities. There are areas where as government we are not good. Communication is one of them. Documentation is one of them, but also engagement. So we work with the civil society very much in those areas. When we are protecting water sources, we want Frank and the team to come in and mobilize the people to participate.
And in doing that, I needed to ask, what challenges are you facing as Wetlands in handling these issues?
The challenges definitely are broad. They range from having inadequate resources to take over all the challenges, but also generally in this country the communities have developed a money mentality.
Yes.
So in some of those communities where they live, when you gather them for some of the meetings,
something that's good for them,
they're asking whether you have transport refund or lunch, even when your home is your home is on with the
you're in the compound.
Yeah, that are those the meetings. So some of the challenges we face, but of course the way we are going around it, first of all, we are having a good working relationship with government, that we participate in each and every government activity. Tomorrow we are part of the Water Day celebrations. So we are slowly changing the attitude, because now what is happening, we're saying like water affects everybody. So for those ones who are badly affected, are increasingly realizing the importance of engaging in efforts, in conversation. We do a lot of community conversations.
Talking is very important.
For people to realize that if they don't solve the problem now, they've been dangerous. So that generally the challenges rotate around having inadequate resources to engage in all the interventions we want, but also some of the community's attitude in terms of thinking of development efforts, and also not being very far-sighted. And of course, the money now has become a very big issue in terms of community-related work.
Yeah. One of the biggest problems that we're having is that water, most of our water comes from rain. One way or another. That's being affected by the way the environment is being degraded. We're reclaiming wetlands at a very scary rate. Forest cover is being lost at about, unofficial figures have it at almost 3% per annum, which means that in about 30 years, Uganda is going to be a desert. And it's a very scary thing to imagine that we don't pay attention to, and yet it's actually a big possibility. What do you want the people watching this show to do about that? Because whether they like it or not, in the next 2 generations, it's their children that are going to be suffering.
I agree with you, Ben, and one thing I would also want the viewers to recognize is that none of these things are interrelated. If you destroy wetland, water is affected. If you cut trees, it means the rain will reduce. If you cut trees, then there will be a lot of erosion. You lose the fertile soil on your land. It goes into water bodies. The water bodies are silted up. The water is not available. So what are we doing?
Everything is all connected.
They are so interconnected.
The reason we have floods is because of things like that.
None of these things. So what we are doing as a government, we recognize that maybe some of these things have not been put into that broad perspective. So as I mentioned earlier, we started 6 years ago to develop a program called Catchment-based integrated water resources management. Integrated, that to get people to understand that these things are so interrelated. And we are handing it over the communities, the locals, the stakeholders, and say
through OASNet and the people that they work with.
We bring, for example, NGOs together, we bring local governments together, the private sector, the academic institutions, the central government institutions, the politicians, the technical people. First of all, start by reflecting on the problems and also identifying what is causing these problems, but they themselves trying to find the solutions. And so that we say, but what vision do you want to have for your area in the next maybe 20, 30 years? What can be done? Through that we are managing. Right now we are working in 9 areas, we call them catchments, and those areas we create committees of the stakeholders. For the first time, we are getting people who do not talk with each other. NGOs, for example, do not talk with the government. Private sector would not mind about talking with the others. But we are managing to bring them to have a common view.
Because you can't do this on your own. If you cannot. And when we start suffering, we are all going to suffer together.
Yes, and that's what exactly we are doing, to make sure that people know that it's them who can do all that it takes to change their lives. That the government is not going to come and address it. Many of the wetlands are being degraded by the people themselves. So we want them to understand.
We're not talking about investors here. We're talking about people in the communities themselves.
The investors, of course, will also be there. But we also would want those investors to know the damage they are causing, but also people to demand for action.
And accountability, which is where civil society comes in. What do you want to see going forward as OASNet, as people who are working with communities and all? What's the way forward? What's the ideal way forward?
Basically, I would want to see an empowered community. First of all, being able to realize, understand their issues very and their effects, but also go ahead to take action. The action would be in terms of actually doing themselves what needs to be their role. We call them duties as citizens. So citizens should be able to do their role as citizens, and then demand.
What's their role as citizens?
To ensure that they take care of their lives. Well, first of all, you don't pollute the environment. You don't, do things that encroach on the river banks or water sources. That would be the duty of a citizen, to ensure that you take responsibility of your life. And so along water issues, so you need to know what is it that you have to do to have clean and safe environment, including water. And then once they've done their role, of course they need also to engage with government as that is mandated to provide some of the basic services, so that the government then is able also to deliver on their mandate. Once we do that, then we are seeing a world or Uganda where everybody has access to clean, safe water and environment, and to be glad.
What do you want the government to do?
The government wanted to do about 2 things. One, to have a good environment, a policy environment. So it should be able to put up the good policies. Like it is already mentioned that they are put it about. So in addition to those policies, then to take action, which you call policy implementation. So people there in the countryside, the local government, the districts, sub-counties, should be able to implement what the center has put as a good policy environment, so that the consumers of the services, who are citizens who live in their communities, are able to enjoy the services that the government produces, delivers.
And as government, Dr. Callist, what do you want us to do?
First of all, I would want every Ugandan to understand that the future of this country is in our hands. You can blame government, you can blame NGOs, you can blame the private sector, but the future of Uganda is in our hands. But we also need to remember that all of us have responsibilities. Government, of course, is the duty bearer. It will always show the way, but we should support government. Government is not the one degrading these wetlands. Government is not the one that is cutting trees. It's not the one that is polluting. It's us individuals. It's us, the private sector, us, the civil society. So we need to come together and work with the government to ensure that we get the best for this country. Short of that, Uganda will be doomed in view of the fact that our population is increasing. We are having climate change already here, and many things that are happening that really will require action from all of us.
Just before we go, can you paint a picture? Because I don't think people just really understand how bad this can get. Our population is growing, as Frank said at the beginning of the show, at a rate higher than most countries in the world. We are second in the world at the moment, you said?
Yeah.
And so that means that in another 20, 30 years, our population is expected to top 50, going to 60 million.
Yeah.
And yet, at the same time, our resources are dwindling at almost a higher rate than our population is growing.
Yes.
You mentioned something when we were in the break. Let's go with just the basic thing. The cost of water in Uganda at the moment.
Right.
Water is supposed to be a free resource.
Yes.
But for all intents and purposes. But it's not quite, is it?
It's not, and of course, Ben, one thing, again, people will want to understand is that because so many things are interconnected, if the water is polluted, you have to spend a lot of money to treat it.
The cost of treating it becomes higher.
The cost of treating it comes to you, the consumer. We're talking about the cost of water. The cost of water in Kampala is going up. Why? Because Lake Victoria is highly polluted. National Water is spending a lot of money to treat this water to bring it to you and me. I used to pay 10,000 per month for water, and I would not mind, but right now I go home, I find a bill of 60,000. Sometimes I reach and I've been disconnected. And it's going to be worse if we don't protect this resource. Certainly, the cost of treatment has to be borne by us. If we don't protect wetlands, we don't protect these forests, and
we're not just talking about water. When you factor into the fact that then this bears on the level of productivity as a nation, the cost of food ends up rising, the cost of living, basically, in another 20, 30 years, life is going to become almost hell for us.
It will. Right now, when it rains, all the fertile soil is washed off. Now, productivity is going down just because we are not having actually the fertile soil. It is washed off. The soil moisture is actually reducing. It's just shining for 2 days, you see crops withering. Why? Because the water is not retained there.
The quality of the food that comes out is lower, which means the chances of you falling sick are higher. It's just something that just cuts across, that ends up being a big problem.
In a way, we are trying to bring these discussions at that catchment level, because water doesn't follow administrative boundaries. It will flow where it passes. If it finds you on its way, it will kill you. So we are trying to get people to understand that water has to be looked at the way it flows and the way it should be protected to help us meet all these different needs. Short of that, we'll have a problem.
And finally, Frank, the World Water Day celebrations tomorrow, what's happening? Can you give us some insight on how you're taking part in that tomorrow?
Yes, the entire membership of the Uganda Wetlands Sanitation NGO network has been invited to participate. We have a store in Entebbe, where the National Celebration was set, and about 15 of our members who live within Kampala and Wakiso will be participating. The Western Secretariat is also going to be there. We have a lot of materials to share. Please, viewers, don't miss being in Entebbe tomorrow and get first-hand knowledge.
I assume Dr. Callist is going to be our host tomorrow.
Yes, I will be your host, and I'm actually the chairman of the National Organizing Committee. We'll host you in Entebbe at the Directorate of Water Resources Management. We'll start in Entebbe town at Mayor's Garden with a march past. led by Police Brass Band, will end at the offices of the Directorate of Water Resources Management. We expect about 600, 700 people, made up of school children. We're having donors, our development partners, members of parliament, government agencies, civil society, private sector. Before I came here, I left so many private sector companies setting up.
Getting ready. Who's our chief guest?
Chief guest is the Honorary Minister of Water and Environment, Professor Ephraim Kamuntu. We also, for the first time, will be honoring people that have contributed significantly to the water sector.
That's a very good thing.
12 people will be honored, people who retired about 20 years ago.
Wow.
They will be honored and really presented the public so that they can know what they have done. So we look forward to an exciting day, and we call upon all Ugandans to come and join us.
Dr. Kalis Sindemugaya, Commissioner, Water Resource Management and Regulation. Thank you very much for joining us on the show.
Thank you very much, Ben.
And of course, Frank Tunamasko, Advocacy and Policy Analyst at OWASNet. Thank you for being on the show as well.
Thank you so much, Ben.
It's been a pleasure to have both of you.
Okay,
thank you for watching the show as well. Of course, as you have heard, it's your responsibility to make sure that the water stays clean and pure, because if it doesn't, we could be in for a lot of trouble in just a few years to come. Enjoy the celebrations tomorrow. Thank you for watching the show. Have a good evening.